February 22nd, 2022. You know what? February 21st, but in a few hours it'll be February 22nd. We'll probably spend midnight together. Who knows? We'll see how long this goes. I am back from Louisiana. I am back from a lovely weekend.
The following is a conversation with Vitalik Buterin,
Charles Haas.
His second time on the podcast. Vitalik is the co-founder of Ethereum and one of the most influential people in cryptocurrency and technology broadly defined. Quick mention of our sponsors: Athletic Greens, Magic Spoon, Indeed, Four Sigmatic, and BetterHelp. Check them out in the description to support this podcast. As a side note, let me say that Ethereum, Bitcoin, and many other cryptocurrencies have been taking a wild ride of prices going up and down in the past few months. To me, the prices were never as important as the ideas, both technical and philosophical. Cryptocurrency has the potential to empower billions of people to participate in the global economy in a way that resists the manipulation by centralized power. Also, with smart contracts, layer 2 technologies, data pools, NFTs, and of course, integration of artificial intelligence into the whole thing, we have the opportunity to build tools and worlds that transform physical and digital life as we know it, hopefully minimizing the suffering in the world and maximizing the fun. This is the Lex Friedman Podcast, and here is my conversation with Vitalik Buterin. Let's first talk about Shiba Inu, if we can. Also known as Shiba Token, code SHIB. For context, Shiba Inu was created in August 2020, modeled off of Dogecoin by the anonymous founder known as Ryoshi. On May 10th this year, it had a market capitalization of over 13 billion. And maybe you can explain this, but in a crazy move, you were given half of SHIB's total supply. You burned, aka destroyed, 90% of it. That's worth $6.7 billion. And you donated 10%. That's worth $1.2 billion at the time to an India COVID-19 relief fund, saying you don't want to be the locus of this much power. This is fascinating. Why and how were you able to walk away from this much money and this much power?
So I should probably start by giving some of the backstory around these coins and this concept of giving me coins. So first of all, Shiba Inu, as you said, is this kind of knockoff of Dogecoin, right? And Dogecoin was this initial kind of fun coin that was created back, I think, around 2014 or so. And it was just created by Jackson Palmer and put it out as a joke for a couple of hours, and a community formed around it. And at the beginning, people didn't take it very seriously. I actually remember putting about $25,000 into Doge sometime around 2016. And I just remember just thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to explain to my mom that I just invested $25,000 into dog coins? And what even are dog coins? The only interesting thing about this coin is that there's, a logo of a dog somewhere. But, of course, that ended up being one of the best investments I've ever made. And it did really well. And then at the end of 2020, Elon Musk, of course, started talking about Dogecoin, and the market cap just shot up to about $50 billion. Actually, and it shot up multiple times, right? The first time it went up from about 0.8 cents to about 7 cents. And this just happened all in one day. And I remember this was when I was still in Singapore in the middle of COVID, and I saw that the price just went up by 1,000%, and I was like, oh my God, my Doge is worth a lot. And so I immediately called up some of my friends and told them to drop everything and scramble. And I sold half the Doge, and I got $4.3 million, donated the proceeds to give directly. And a few hours after I did this, the price dropped back down from about 7 cents to 4 cents, right? So I managed to sell the Doge at the top, and I remember just feeling like I was such an amazing trader. But then, of course, the price went up from 4 cents, then to 7, and then 50, and just Doge becoming this big phenomenon where there's even a lot of people that have heard of Doge that have not heard of Ethereum. It's just like something even I wasn't predicting, right? And so after that, of course, we have Doge, and then people are thinking, well, if the leading dog token is worth $50 billion, then surely the second largest dog token deserves, at least 7 or 8 billion, right? Like, I feel like that's kind of what the mindset of these Shiba people is. So then, of course, they did this other gimmick, right, where they gave me half the Shiba token supply. They were actually not the first project to do this. So around the end of 2020, there was this weird project called Teller. It's like Tellor. I think they're a Chainlink competitor or something like this. But I remember they just dumped $50,000 worth of their token into my wallet. And then they had their Twitter army just basically run around saying, look at Vitalik's wallet. Vitalik holds Tellers. He's one of us. He's a supporter. And as soon as I discovered this, I just publicly sold the Teller tokens on Uniswap, and this created a bit of a Twitter splat. Now, the Shiba people were more clever. The Shiba people, instead of dumping to that wallet, they dumped to my cold wallet, right? So in cryptocurrency, right, there's this concept of cold wallets and hot wallets. Basically, the thing that actually owns your money is this 80-digit number called a private key, right? And a hot wallet is when that private key is just stored in memory on your computer, on your phone, really easy to access. Cold wallet means it's either written down on a piece of paper, or it's on a computer that's just never accessed the internet, right? So cold is very inconvenient, but cold is also much more secure, right? Because even if that computer has some viruses on it, it's air gapped, it's not actually going to be able to upload it. So this cold wallet, and all the money's out of the cold wallet, so it's safe for me to talk about my setup now, right? But it was a laptop that was sitting in Canada, and I also had 2 pieces of paper where I wrote down 2 numbers on those 2 pieces of paper. Mm-hmm. One was with me, one was in Canada, and if you add those 2 numbers together, you get the private key. So because of COVID travel restrictions, and this is cold wallets in Canada, it's very difficult for me to actually access it, right? And I'm not sure if they knew this. Maybe they just got lucky. But basically, they sent a lot of these dog tokens into this wallet where it was very difficult for me to access it. But then I saw these dog tokens, I saw more and more people talking about them, and then at some point I realized that hey, these things are worth billions of dollars, and there's lots of really good things that you could do with that amount of money, and it would actually be a waste to just see it go. So I made the decision that I would actually power through and figure out how to safely basically get my private key. I actually had to call up my family, tell them to read out their number off of their piece of paper. I entered that into a fresh laptop that I bought from Target. Then I put in my other number on my piece of paper, added the 2 numbers together on the computer. There's the key. And at the same time, just scrambled for 2 days, setting up a new wallet where I could move my ETH to safely, getting people to be multi-sig partners, just doing all sorts of stuff that 10 years ago you would expect to just be part of a cyberpunk science fiction novel, but now it's all real.
So you're doing this all by yourself, essentially.
Most of it by myself. So you
have to keep it secret,
right? And I needed my family to actually go and read the number on their piece of paper, and then I in my new multi-sig wallet, there's other people that are signatories, but I'm obviously not going to reveal any details beyond that. So I did this, right, and I actually managed to get the private key, make the first transaction that would just move all my Ether to the multi-sig wallet so it's safe, and then second put the private key on my main computer, then started going in and just selling some of the dog tokens, and then just giving them to these different charities. Now, at the time, I actually did not even have any idea of how much you would be able to get, right? Because on paper, the dog tokens are $7 billion, but in reality, it's a very liquid market. Are you going to crash it by after you sell 1 million worth? Are you going to crash it after 10 million? Are you going might you actually be able to get an entire 200 million? I had no idea. So I definitely was just of the mindset okay, I'll sell a bit, maybe get some ETH, and then donated some ETH to GiveWell, donated some to other groups, and then have some dog tokens. I don't have an easy ability to sell more myself, but then I'll just give them to these groups, and hopefully they'll do good things with them. It was actually I actually donated 20% and dumped 80%. Yeah, so the COVID India group got one batch, and then there's another group that got another batch. And I don't want to say who they are because I think they want to announce themselves at some point.
Sure.
Yeah, but you can see the fact that these transactions were made on the blockchain. But no, it was just very interesting and unexpected, and just an insanely crazy situation.
It's been a couple of weeks. First of all, thank you for helping me hang up some curtains. This is a first for the podcast, and shows that you're truly a special person to be willing to help. But now, a couple of weeks later, do you regret any aspect of that decision?
I'm sure there's some things that I probably could have done better. Like I was actually talking to some of these charities, and I was impressed by just how much money they managed to get out of selling some of these coins. So I probably could have done better by just like talking more with traders and actually ensuring that they can do a better job of maximizing the value of all of them. But like, it was this very stressful time, and I did have to act quickly. Like I did manage to, make a lot of the donations before, like a few days before the great crypto crash happened. So it was, and it's difficult to like. Obviously, there's parallel universes in which I did better, but at the same time, there's also lots of parallel universes where, because I hesitated more and tried to spend more time thinking, I missed the opportunity. So, on net, it's like a luck of the draw, and I'm just, happy that everything was able to turn out as well as it did.
But psychologically, you mentioned stress. How hard was it?
It was stressful, right? I think, one of the really stressful parts was just the fact that I had to basically move all of my funds, including the 325,000 Ether from one cold wallet into another hot wallet, into another multi-sig wallet. And, maybe the multi-sig wallet had a bug in it. Maybe there's like some mistake I'll make in the middle that causes the funds to get lost. Like, that part was stressful, and I was definitely stressing out for 2 days. I mean, triple checking the new wallet. I even did a bit of an audit of the code myself. I wrote my own JavaScript dApp to make confirmations because Gnosis Safe didn't work with the status wallet well. So there was that whole thing was definitely a bit of a marathon. I was also kind of definitely a bit worried about, or uncertain, I guess, how the public and, including the coin communities would perceive the whole thing. But I was actually impressed. Like for every poster that was saying like, no, why did Vitalik like rug pull on us? His wallet was supposed to be a burn address. There's like 10 people that were like, oh, I thought I was just in this because it's a fun pyramid gambling thing, but instead I ended up being part of this, great public good thing for humanity, and that's like even more amazing. So the amount of that I got was very impressive. So all in all, I think the dog people did great.
The dog people. Is there something you can extend to the bigger picture of it? In the principles you applied in making this decision, is there some principles, philosophies that you apply also to the decisions you make around Ethereum?
I think a big one for me is just this idea that crypto, isn't just an opportunity to give people like slightly better ways to save value and all of these things. Like it's also an opportunity to like basically create these like new digital institutions that could like serve the public good in new ways. And that's something that I've been interested in for a long time. I actually even have this article in Bitcoin Magazine back in 2014 where I basically suggested this idea that, you would have coins that represent causes, and like people would just like buy and accept those coins because they support those causes. So I think it's called Markets, Institutions, and Currencies, a New Form of Social Incentivization or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can find it and throw it in the links. So that was interesting to kind of see becoming real. And like in general, right, I think, public goods are very important, and on the internet, public goods are even more important, right? Like every single Lex Friedman podcast is just on YouTube, and anyone can go and see it. Like there's no way for you to like sell it and so that some people can see it, but then other people can't see it. Like you could do that, but then you'd obviously be reducing your impact. So thank you for making the amazing Lex Friedman podcast so freely available.
Well, that's actually a tense thing, is how do you do it in a way that's not controlled in a centralized fashion? Because actually YouTube feels free and open, but it nevertheless is one company making centralized decisions. And the first time I realized YouTube is not forever is when a lot of the Joe Rogan Experience library was pulled from YouTube as part of the Spotify deal. And it made me realize we need to, it's like the realization that fiat money is centralized, is realizing that, this is not forever, and you might want to come up with schemes to distribute it, to decentralize the control of it in the way that audio for podcast is, with just an RSS feed.
Exactly. No, and I think one of the kind of philosophical things that I hope to achieve is kind of decouple the concept of public goods, which are incredibly important and are the lifeblood of modern civilization, from the idea that there like is or can be one central organization that represents the public and like perfectly understands and can impose their idea of what is the good. Right, like it's when people talk about public goods, like it just often comes with this baggage of either centralization or conformism, and I think like it doesn't have to, right? Like often the most important public goods are the ones that are created by the crazy individualists that disagree with everyone else. So trying to make this kind of synthesis where you combine the values of decentralization and the values of open source, but you're not naive about it, and like you realize that for these things to be produced, there needs to be a way for it to be sustainable. There needs to be some way of supporting people who are working these projects, but at the same time, you want to avoid that turning into a vector of centralization, like trying to sort of get all of the good things without the bad things. To me, that's a big part of sort of what my grand experiment in crypto is about. Right? And like we are doing things in different kinds of things for this, right? Like there's the Gitcoin grants quadratic funding in the Ethereum ecosystem. There's obviously these dog coins that just happens, like I guess accidentally. There's other projects that, like for example, Uniswap has their Uniswap DAO that just has a huge amount of funding, and like we haven't seen yet how that's going to be deployed, but it could be potentially deployed to do lots of really good and amazing things.
Do you see Ethereum as essentially a mechanism to fight for social causes?
I definitely see Ethereum as being a mechanism to fight for definitely some specific things that are social causes, like just the fact of creating an open financial system that anyone can participate in no matter where they are in the world. That's a social cause. Just giving people the ability to organize and create projects, even if it's 5 people in 5 different countries. And like that kind of inclusiveness, I think that's a social cause, and it's a core crypto value. But then at the same time, like the other important kind of part of the magic of Ethereum that you have to balance that against is that it is also this open platform where ultimately, the things that are on Ethereum is just the things that the community makes of it.
Well, you kind of briefly opened the door, so let's go there. When it comes to government regulation of crypto, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario in terms of, as you've kind of mentioned, Ethereum challenges the power centers of the world, and how do you see the interplay between governments and this new technology that resists centralized power? Best case and worst case.
The best case is that blockchains continue to prosper and we figure out scalability so that people can actually start doing things on all of the amazing use cases that people have been talking about, instead of today where a lot of the great stuff gets priced out because transaction fees are at $5 to $10, and then we see a lot of different amazing applications happening on blockchains. It could be like DAOs creating new ways for people to interact and organize with each other, new ways for artists to get funded, and just all sorts of these amazing things. And there's just enough public support and just enough people that see that look, crypto is clearly doing a lot of good things, and there are definitely areas where there's tensions, but there's areas where there's tensions, like there could be some kind of creative and interesting approaches that get figured out, right? Like, the concept of corporate taxes, for example, right? Like, it doesn't, that would disappear as a revenue stream if theoretically corporations just all get replaced by DAOs. But like maybe there's some other creative way by which DAOs themselves can kind of be have some kind of encoded governance that ensures that they have at least some kind of bias towards serving the global public good. And maybe it does enough of DAOs can do enough of that people are happy with it. And there are going to be things that people are unhappy about. There's always going to be the people that wants to surveil everyone. But if on the kind of effect of crypto from just empowering people is greater than that and greater than that in a way that people can just easily see, then that would be a good scenario, right? And we'll just become kind of incorporated and accepted the same way as happened with the internet. But in the worst case scenario would, of course, be just people suddenly, flipping and going into moral panic mode and just, oh my God, this technology is used by insert bad group of the day. And then I don't think governments have the ability to ban crypto to the extent of just preventing blockchains from existing, but they definitely have the ability to really marginalize it, right? Like if you just ban all exchanges, and ban all links from the fiat ecosystem to crypto, and you ban all kind of mainstream employers from accepting or paying in cryptocurrency, then you can successfully turn it into a fairly kind of niche countercultural thing that has much less impact than it otherwise would. So it's somewhere between the good scenario and the bad scenario. I'm obviously hoping for the good.
Well, that's interesting. Also, the tension between governments and companies. Like if you have a bunch of billionaires or a bunch of companies like Tesla investing in Bitcoin and then governments resisting that, it's interesting who wins out in that worst case scenario. And it almost when companies and rich, quote unquote, respectable people embrace cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, so on, even the dog coins, it's almost sends a signal to everybody else that this is a revolution that's here to stay. On this one little tangent that you brought up, this is almost an outdated idea, but it's still with us, which is cryptocurrencies are used for illegal activity, for drugs, for crime, and so on. Is there some sense that worries you that if cryptocurrency, if Ethereum runs the world, then crime, making money from crime will be easier?
There's always that possibility, but at the same time, I think if you look at the world as a whole and the way all the other technological trends are going, in-person surveillance is just going up every year, right?
Yeah.
If you commit a crime in meat space, it's getting harder and harder to get away with it. So if you wants to do something, and this is something that's just happening as a result of just better technology, information transparency. A lot of it's hard to prevent, even if you really tried. So the world where things go dark to such an as the police hawks sometimes like to say, to such an extent that oh my God, the criminals are committing crimes with impunity and we can't see anything. That just seems unlikely. But on the other hand, the world where there just is no privacy, for example, or the world where there just like is no ability to kind of act outside of the confines of mainstream institutions. Like some that's something that's more realistic, and that seems like something that could lead to a lot of a lot of scary things, right? And like even from a government's point of view, right? Like I think governments over the last few years, a lot of them, they're very worried about sovereignty. They're worried about like if their countries, economies, and social environments are just completely dependent on basically foreign tech companies controlled by foreign governments. Like governments are not on team government, right? It's like the Indian government is on team India, the Russian government is on team Russia, and so forth, right? So like they don't want the U.S. to be able to like have this big backdoor into everything. So I do think that a balance is needed, but and at the same time, I do think I guess I definitely like worry more about the possibility that just like without things like crypto kind of acting outside of institutions becomes too impossible. And I don't even necessarily mean outside of governments, even just outside of corporations, like becomes too impossible, and there's just like terrible things that come as a result. And if things going in the other direction, like it obviously is a risk, but at the same time, I think in the long term, like a crypto can potentially even like offer defenses as much as attacks against that sort of thing.
Yeah, throughout history, many of the most destructive things came from centralized institutions versus sort of from the people operating in the shadows. And I've been talking to a bunch of psychedelics folks, the people doing researchers like Rick Doblin in Johns Hopkins. There's a lot of exciting research on psychedelics. And one thing you could say about operating at the edge of legality, it could actually accelerate the adoption of particular things, like whether it's marijuana or psychedelics. They can help people out. It almost accelerates the policy. It forces the policy to catch up to where the people stand.
Right.
So there's a positive way of doing things that are in the gray area of legality and creating a market that allows people to in a safe way, be able to participate in this gray area of legality.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that the set of like the kinds of things that just like payment processors as companies try to restrict you from is much larger than the set of things that's illegal, right?
Right.
Like part of that is because they want to be super conservative, and like the more layers you have, the more they're like conservative because they're scared of what the layer below them will do to them. Sometimes they have their own, moral opinions of various kinds. Like, they go after lots of people, right? Like they make life really hard for, like sex workers, for example. Psychedelics, as you mentioned. There's a lot of activity, even including stuff that is totally legal. That just, there's this like, shadow like PayPal credit card government or whatever you want to call it, and that makes it just hard to participate in this stuff. So I think like reducing the number of intermediaries is definitely normally a good thing.
All right, let's talk about one of the most exciting technologies, like technically, philosophically, like socially, financially, in every way, which is Ethereum 2.0. There's a million things to talk about, but at the step one is probably a good thing to do, which is, can you briefly summarize your vision, how Ethereum 2.0 will make Ethereum more scalable, secure, and sustainable?
Sure. So I think recently we've actually been kind of de-emphasizing the ETH 2.0 branding, I guess. So the reason behind that was that originally we envisioned something more like a big grand event where, all the good things would happen at the same time, and it would be a new blockchain, and it would be a new protocol, and people would have to take a lot of effort to migrate over. But later we've slowly changed the roadmap over to something that's much more incremental. Right. So, proof of stake happens kind of over time, and then sharding gets added over time, and all these features get added over time. And so the experience for just a regular Ethereum user still feels very seamless, right? It's like maybe a little bit more complex than the hard forks that we've already done, but from a user's point of view, but like not by that much, right? So The big two things that are happening, right? These are what used to be considered the two flagship features of ETH 2.0, and now they're just, the flagship features of the next evolution of Ethereum.
Yes.
Yeah, as proof of stake and sharding. Right. So proof of stake is a consensus algorithm. It's or consensus mechanism, I should say. It's the difference is that like an algorithm is something that you run by yourself. A mechanism is like it involves like interactions between people, and it could even include incentives and all of that. So a consensus mechanism, so by which nodes in the network agree on, which blocks came in, which transactions came in what order, make sure that once a block gets accepted, it can't get reverted, and all of these things that we expect from a blockchain. So existing blockchains, including Bitcoin, including the Ethereum of today, and including a lot of them, they use proof of work, right? So the reason why we need proof of anything is because like they serve this function that I call kind of economic Sybil resistance. So that's obviously a big word for, especially if you've never heard of Sybils before. But like the basic idea is right that you have a network and you have lots of computers that agree on like which block to accept, and sometimes you get two blocks that get published at the same time, and you just have to agree on an order. So there has to be some kind of voting game. Yeah, but then the question is, well, in this voting game, who gets a vote, who gets to participate? Now, you can't say one person, one vote, right? The reason why you cannot say one person, one vote is because you need some kind of like authority or some kind of mechanism to say, who the humans are, like, and if you don't have that, then a bad guy could just come in with a virtual machine or with a computer that has on it 10 billion virtual machines that have 10 billion, virtual nodes, and then just like say, look, I'm 99% of the network. I should control everything. So to prevent this, what proof of work and proof of stake both do is they basically say, well, the weight of your vote, like how much influence your votes have in the consensus, is proportional to like what quantity of economic resources you bring in. So in the case of proof of work, you prove what economic resources you have because your economic resources are computers, and you prove that you have them by just running them 24/7 using these hash algorithms, right? So this does solve the problem, right? Because in order to attack the network, you have to come in with more computers and like more money invested into computers and electricity than the rest of the network put together. And that's extremely expensive. In proof of stake, instead of relying on people with computers that are just constantly cranking out hashes 24/7, as your like unit of economic resources, you just use like holdings of coins inside the system, right? So all of these blockchains, they have some kind of coin in them. Bitcoin has Bitcoin, Ethereum has Ether. They all have a coin. So why not just use that as the economic resource that you're using to like measure participation? So that's like the core distinction between proof of work and proof of stake. I like proof of stake, and I've liked proof of stake for many years, basically because like it just requires much less ongoing resource consumption. Right, like with proof of work, you have to like actually go and buy these physical computers, and these days, they have specialized hardware, ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits. You have to go produce them, and you have to go buy them, and unless you have millions of dollars, you have to buy them from one of these other people who creates them, and those other people often end up taking a huge cut of the profits themselves, and then you have to plug them in. You have to just burn all of this electricity that's just running 24/7. So it consumes a huge amount of energy, right? And and not just energy. It also, just to create the hardware, right? Like people focus a lot on energy, but like actually about half the cost of proof of work mining is the cost of the hardware. So hardware is a very big deal too. And you need this this really big and powerful, like very specialized hardware, the kind that fills up these big warehouses. So proof of stake, you don't really need that much electricity. You just need just a little bit to run a regular computer. You can run proof of stake validators on computers that you already have. So it's just much less resource intensive. And like this is good for a few reasons, right? Like one is, the kind of environmental rationale that, you're not breaking the environment. The second is that you're not taking away electricity and like other resources from other people, right? Like there's, I think just today I saw a story about like Iran wanting to shut down some Bitcoin mining because it was just grabbing up so much electricity that it was, outbidding the nearby towns, and they just didn't have enough. And then there is like Chia, the one that's doing proof of like hard disk mining, basically is just like grabbing up so many hard disks, so there's a shortage, right? So that's the second reason. And then the third, more selfish reason is that because participating in consensus does not require so much energy expenditure, you don't need to pay people as much to participate, right? So like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they both issue somewhere around 4% of the total supply every year right now to miners. So Ethereum is about 4.7 million Ether, and the current supply is about 115 million. But with proof of stake, like we expect it'll be somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million per year. So that means the supply doesn't have to increase so quickly. So
one of the pros that that people sort of argue for the proof of work is that it is secure because it's much more difficult to sort of, as you've highlighted, is difficult to participate. Is there what are your thoughts about the security of the proof of stake mechanism? Is there ways to make it secure?
So I think proof of stake is very secure because in order to be able to attack the system, you need to have like basically as much stake as the rest of the network, right? So that means like right now, for example, we have 5 million ETH staking. So you have to come up with 5 million ETH and then join the network. And then the other, so 5 million ETH is a lot, right? It's like, how much is it now? Like $15 billion. So that's actually more than I believe the cost of attacking the Bitcoin network. And then the second thing is that recovering from attacks is much easier in proof of stake than in proof of work, right? Because in proof of stake, you have, like, first of all, we have, for many kinds of attacks that you do against this network, we have this concept of like automatic slashing, right? Which basically means that in order to like revert a finalized block. So if there's one block that's like accepted by the network and you try to convince the network to kind of revert that block and accept a different block, in order to make that kind of attack, you basically have to have your validator, like a big portion of your validators, signed to conflicting messages. And this is something that, like, once these messages are on the network, like, you can go and prove, like, look, these people did it. And so we have this feature in the protocol called slashing, where you basically take all these people who provably misbehaved and you burn their coins, right? And you don't burn anyone else's coins. Now, there are other cases, like, for example, if instead of reverting blocks, the attack just tries to censor everyone, right? Then what you do, everyone who got censored would just like basically create the minority chain, and then the community would basically have to do a soft fork, right? They would just have to say like, look, this chain is clearly attacking us. This chain is the one not attacking us. And so we're going to join this chain. And then what happens is that on that new chain, the attackers also lose a lot of coins. Right.
Yeah.
So the difference between proof of stake and proof of work is that in a proof of stake system, like, you can identify specific participants and you can say, these, and like, this isn't like, a human going in and saying, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't like you. This is like automated, right? You can
the slashing process is automated.
Yes.
Is there ways it can go wrong? So that's a painful process where the coins are burned.
It is painful. Yes. I think, the one big unknown, of course, is like if an attack actually happens, and like if an attack happens that requires the community to actually choose one of these minority forks, then like what would the community actually